Good morning. It is the 4th of July, which is America's birthday. Now, I'm going to have a conversation about what this means for people right now. And the truth is it's not much. The reason it's not much is we have gone in a way in our street or in our country where people are losing their rights persistently. And I'll go into some more details about it a little later. But the reality is, America is 246. And we're still having arguments about slavery. And we don't talk about it, but it is still persistent. And we won't address the issue because we have resigned ourselves not to talk about the government, politics, religion, and all of these things. So I'm going to dive in to what I feel is an important distinction for why we're where we are at. And so, first, I'll say that I'm a patriot and I love this country for the ideals it was founded on. The idea that you have freedoms to do and say what you want. Now, those ideals were never met. First, because we allowed slavery, because at the time it was a fashionable thing to do. And when I say that, I mean, we declared our independence and we said slavery is okay because everybody else is okay with it. And it was free labor in which we intentionally removed people from where they were to bring them here to force them to work for us. Now, it's a shameful part of our history. But today, we still have people who advocate for stuff like this, especially when slavery comes in the form of indentured servitude. Now, we don't view our society as a society of indentured servants, but when it comes down to it, and you look at it from a more holistic view, big picture, our society is littered with people who, even though they believe they have a sort of freedom to move up or move sideways, are really just struggling under the yoke of the servitude, because it really is, of being in low paying jobs, being in housing that they have to pay for, being in a situation where food is not only pretty terrible, and we as a society don't give them that way out. And so, you have millions of people who work for minimum wage and never can see past what they want. And when I say that, whether it's a car, whether it's even a laptop, we our debt-based society has made it nearly impossible for them to achieve those things. And if they do achieve those things by working hard or um, getting further, trying to get further along through working hard by getting loans to pay for their car or their or whatever, they're they become so indebted that they can't afford to think about anything else. And so it becomes problematic for us to move forward because we have so many people that can't do anything. They're shackled to their debt. And it's self-inflicted, but we encourage it by our commercials, by people wanting to be like other people. Um, and then we discourage people learning more so they can, pardon me, so they can improve their financial situation. And we have it just, we're sort of just kind of flailing in the water. Um, on top of that, there are groups of people who um, want to restrict the rights of other people. Now, I don't want to start a blame situation where we blame a certain subset of people. It's going to happen, but I don't want to start this. But the problem with our current situation, like the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Now, I'm going to say a few things that are going to be unpopular. One, Roe versus Wade was meant to be a stopgap. And the Democratic Party had enough of a majority in the 70s and 80s, even until the mid 90s, to pass an effective national framework for abortion. And they didn't do it for whatever reason. And so, and after 1994, it was going to be impossible because Republicans were able to actually create a national narrative where they weren't, while they were still the party of the minority, they became majority players in national politics because of various just sort of, I won't say indoctrination, although basically they awakened the conservative nature of various groups and brought it to the forefront. And since 1994, there really hasn't been a way to create a real framework for this. And so it was a lost opportunity when the Democrats didn't take advantage of this stranglehold they held on both houses of Congress. And because of that, we have a situation now where women are basically second class citizens because They can't make decisions about their body, and a lot of states are attempting to make it so they can't use contraception, they can't get an abortion if they're a family member rapes them, they can't get an abortion if they suffer sexual assault for any reason. And it's like the Republicans don't care about anything other than saying, well, you can't do this. And unfortunately, we are looking at the potential for um, millions of people just being completely disenfranchised. And it's just, it's hard to just say it. It's hard. I just can't express in words how dumb this is. And it is dumb. We don't we don't have an activist left side of the aisle. It's period. That's plain and simple. We don't have an activist left side of the aisle. We don't have people who are trying to change minds and hearts in the Democratic Party because we're fighting too much on what progressive agenda we are trying to achieve. And I understand climate change is an important thing, but if you really want to affect climate change, stop driving. If you really want to affect climate change, insist on uh, insist on different options from the people who provide your stuff. I mean, we live in a consumer society, so you have to buy stuff. And if you choose the lazy option, you're just encouraging uh, items that are terrible for the climate. Now, I'm going to say this, and environmentalists are going to hate me, but climate change isn't just human generated. Yes, we help, but the reality is the earth is changing too. And we go through these cyclical periods where it's super hot, uh, it's super hot, it, volcanism, whatever. There are periods in Earth's history where naturally it gets hot. Now, I'm less worried about oil being burned than I am about fracking. And the reason for that is history shows that when the earth was at its hottest, it was methane mixed into the air, which is what natural gas is. And methane is a heat accelerant. And because fracking breaks the pockets where uh, methane is sort of stored or trapped in the crust, a large enough methane leak would cause enough heating to kill everything. And we don't care about that because we have to have natural gas because it's cleaner than oil. It's not. And there's no such thing as clean coal, but I won't go into that. But let's get back to what the original concept for today is. Today is America's birthday, and America is 246 years old. We are still having conversations about whether people have the right to choose their own anything. Women especially. Women have become with Roe versus Wade and the potential for uh, the rollback of contraceptive uh, use in many states if the Supreme Court takes those cases up. Um, that not only, I mean, I kind of covered it earlier, but I mean, a contraception ban would be absolutely devastating. Now, what I find hilarious is 20 years ago, Republicans didn't care at all for family leave. They didn't want any of it. And now they would rather companies provide 6 months of family leave than provide transportation to get an abortion. Now, I'll say this. When it comes to abortion, it's not my choice, so my opinion does not matter. But I think that the benchmark for deciding on whether an abortion is viable or not should be a monetary. I mean, forget that women forget about all the bullshit that pro-life people say that women go through when they have an abortion. Forget all of it. If the cost of you getting an abortion is equal to or less than carrying the baby and giving it up for adoption, then abortion should be available. And the reason for that is pretty straightforward. We had a discussion, or I mentioned early on in the video that millions of people are just completely struggling with their financial capabilities. And if it's going to cost $20,000, which is probably low, to have a baby, or it would cost $150 or $200 to have an abortion, and you're financially incapable of, because and the cost to have a baby is actually much more than that, because if you're a woman and say you make minimum wage and you got to pay your rent and and you got to feed yourself and you get pregnant and you're forced to have the baby because your state government has chosen to say you don't have the right to decide anything about your body because killing a fetus is murder, then the cost for having an abortion becomes not only the cost to go to the hospital and prenatal care, if you can even bother to get to those appointments. And I say that in that particularly sarcastic way because if you're working 40 hours a week during the day, say, how are you going, and you get paid hourly, how are you going to justify going to the doctor over paying your rent, over buying food? It doesn't make sense. Now, if you want to have children and you're in that situation, then you make that decision. But you it's next to impossible for anyone to make that choice. I mean, you live by the law, but there are some ways the law just doesn't matter here. You know, you because if, say, for example, you're forced to carry to term with your present pregnancy because your state doesn't allow abortion anymore. What are the odds of a child being born with a birth defect or you miscarrying because of all the stress you have to deal with for the entirety of the pregnancy? And it just it doesn't make sense to me. You know, they Republicans and pro-lifers claim it's compassionate, but it's not. It doesn't take into account what the woman who has to carry the pregnancy that didn't want it to term. And I just don't understand the logic behind it. I mean, I do, and it's because Christians have this idea that we should have religious law in our government. Now, not all Christians believe this, but anyone who supports a ban on abortion, anyone who supports a ban on gay marriage, anyone who supports a ban on contraception really is trying to enact the Christian version of Sharia law. And I'll go there because enforcing religious rules on a secular society is exactly that. Now, the laws aren't going to be as draconian as might be enforced in Islamic countries, but the reality is that banning abortion, banning gay marriage, banning sodomy, which is I find funny given most Christians who oppose sodomy apparently enjoy it. Um, and banning contraception is saying women aren't worth the sperm spilled to create them. Gay people aren't worth the sperm spilled to create them. And before Christians get on me about, well, the Bible was written by people who hated people. 100%. There is no actual reason beyond hatred that these things were written. They say, oh, well, they point to John 3:16. John 3:16 is a crock of shit. Okay? Because if you say that you should worship a guy who was trying to change his world for the better, who was a Jew, I might add, then you're a hypocrite. Being a man of God doesn't make him God. And nothing ever has, nothing ever will. And that's my rant about Christianity. here we are, but politically, on this 4th of July, I've kind of diverted the conversation, but politically on the 4th of July, we have a serious problem. We are ideologically divided. There are ideologically divides that are ideological divides in our country that I'm not sure can be bridged. You have the coast, mainly the Northeast and the West Coast, who are more into the American ideal than the rest of the country. And I say that because these places want you to be able to live a life that you can be happy with. But then the rest of the country wants to ban abortion, it wants to ban gay marriage, it wants to ban all this stuff, and that just takes liberty away. And you can say, well, fetuses have rights too. Well, let's do math. If, say, for example, I got a woman pregnant, how long would the baby have to stay in the womb for it to be viable? And you can say, oh, well, we could probably get the fetus out of a woman's body at 20 weeks and it would survive. But going back to my abortion argument, if you compare financially this, if you say, well, if a fetus can live 20 weeks out of the womb, well, what's the question? It's a financial question. What is the cost of an abortion? It's a couple $100. I really don't know. I don't particularly care. I don't get women pregnant because I'm not stupid. But if you extract a fetus from the womb at 20 weeks, how much would it cost to make that fetus survive outside the womb after 20 weeks? And what kind of life would that fetus live? Because let's be honest, 90% of extremely premature babies die. And it costs thousands of dollars more, which is a financial burden most people can't afford. I just don't get it. I just don't get that logic doesn't work with these people. And yes, I understand there are groups who want to go back to the 4th century AD and have laws like that where you can beat your wife whenever you like. You can do whatever you want to your wife without repercussion. You can kill your wife to achieve divorce. I mean, it's just dumb. It really is. I don't understand why these people want to restrict our ability to be happy. And I just realized I have been rambling for 30 minutes. 30 minutes. And I still haven't gotten to where I need to be, where I was going with this conversation. The ideological divide in our country is unbelievable. And there are people who think about it, there are people who don't. And the reality is that much of what we want, freedom, the ability to be able to do what we want, is we're beset on all sides by idiots. I think we have come to a time where we need to consider options. Now, I'm not going to say that there should be a rebellion or a revolution, but as long as we are divided on what we believe and where we are as a people, we're just going to continue along, shifting from left to right. We're like a zombie on an ice lake. With each step, we slide further one way or the other. And that's our election cycle. The House of Representatives, while it is the lower house of our Congress, is the driver for what we do ideologically for the next 2 years. And because of this, I think we need a constitutional Congress to fix it. I apologize for the disjointed stream. I'm going to end this here. If you watched it, I hope you enjoyed it. Click like, click subscribe. And I think I'm going to do this more often. Have a great day, and thank you.